For students, educators, and parents, summer of 2021 will be a return to normal, with in-person experiences returning following the past year of response to the COVID-19 pandemic. Now, historically, summer offers students STEM learning opportunities that are impossible during the school year. From remediation camps to project-based and work-based learning opportunities, summer can be a time for reinforcement, for growth, for exploration. And the same is true for educators who can also find opportunities to hone their craft. Engaging employers in meaningful ways and supporting these summer experiences provides opportunities that can benefit the entire community. Now, this event today brings together a panel of practitioners from industry and education to explore how employers can support STEM during the summer months. With the experience of the past year in mind, panelists will address how their organizations are supporting impactful summer learning experiences with a specific focus on what role employers can play as we return to a new normal summertime. Before we begin, it's been a little while since we've been together, so I want to remind everyone of a few things. First of all, please use that chat feature down at the bottom to back channel and talk about the discussion our panelists are having. Our panelists will also be engaging with you in that chat. Second, and this is probably the most important one, if you have questions, when you have questions, click on that little Q&A button at the bottom. A lot of times people ask in the chat, and sometimes we see those, but a lot of times they kind of get lost in the shuffle. So make sure to get those questions into that chat button and get them in early for the greatest chance of having them answered. And as always, even if you don't have any questions yourself, do us a favor and still keep your eye on the questions in that Q&A tool and vote up the questions that resonate with you. We'll try to prioritize those questions that have a lot of votes. Moderating today's panel is our friend Reginald McGregor, but before we get to Reginald, I'd like to introduce Ted Wells from STEM Connector, who's been helping lead this exciting collaboration. Ted?
Thank you so much, Jeremy, and thank you to our friends at the STEM Learning Ecosystems Community of Practice and TIES. This is our first and hopefully first of many collaborations. We thought a webinar was a great way to kick off on this really important topic. We are clearly in a state of flux, and people are looking for answers. So we're hoping that today's webinar is going to shed some light on how industry can play a role in supporting high-impact, high-quality summer experiences for students and teachers that advance long-term outcomes around workforce readiness and, most importantly, increase equity. For those of you who are STEM Connector members or part of our community, that we are not a new name, but for those of you in the STEM ecosystems, learning ecosystems community of practice, we might be a new name. So I encourage you to visit us at stemconnector.com. We have a newsletter called the STEM Daily that is very popular, as well as a social media feed and lots of other cool resources, like our recent ebook focused on food and agriculture and forthcoming ebook focused on environmentalism and STEM. Today we're really fortunate to have Reginald McGregor of Rolls-Royce, and he is one of the leaders of the STEM learning ecosystems. And I don't know how Reginald has a day job and does everything that he does to support the STEM learning ecosystems community of practice, but he does. And he is an engineering and improvement manager with nearly 20 years at Rolls-Royce North America in Indiana, as part of the Defense Engineering Operations Management team. He's also manager of engineering employee development and STEM outreach in North America. And he serves as president of the Lawrence Township School District in Indianapolis and is on the National Assessment Governing Board, setting policy for the NAEP, National Assessment of Educational Progress. So Reginald, thanks. It's been a pleasure working with you on this, and I look forward to today's discussion.
Hey, thank you for that introduction, Jeremy. As always, thank you for the beautiful and exciting kickoff. So we have about, I'll say about 30, 35 minutes to start a conversation on this Friday afternoon. So we know that we cannot cover everything today. So some topics will surface that we'll do a deeper dive of in another webinar that will take place on Tuesday, May 25th. Jeremy, remind everybody throughout the day, there will be more of a deeper dive, but we're going to pick the brains of these wonderful experts and just really talk about summer, COVID-19, their strategies and pivoting, and thus therefore. Now, what I like about the panel is that we have enough people across different segments, after school program, national program, the importance of a industry engaging, and then how do you ensure the students get the experience that they need? So we're just gonna go ahead and get kicked off. So I'd like to invite our panelists, Mr. Drew Glassford, Ms. Hillary McDonald, and Ms. Ivana Jackson. Hopefully you got to see their bios, so we don't want to take up 20 minutes talking about their bios. As I ask them questions, they'll do a brief introduction of themselves, and we'll jump right in. So strap down, buckle up, sit back, relax, sip, and stay focused. And don't forget to also send information into the chat. So let's get started, panelists. Everybody take a deep breath. Nothing to be afraid of. You are the experts. But I would like to start with you, Drew. Drew, with the Boys and Girls Club, a national organization that impact kids across the nation. And I'm sure you sit in that, I call that in-between space, education, industry. So you have to have good partnerships. Can you just talk to us a little bit about how this COVID-19 has impacted you, and how do you engage with businesses, and what changes have you made, whether good, bad, that you've made due to the COVID-19 pandemic?
Reginald, thank you. It's great to be here. We're the third largest club in Illinois. We serve about 2,000 mostly minority and under-resourced youth in our after-school program. And we've been through all the pivots that everyone's gone through this year, but we remained open. We reopened about 2 weeks into the pandemic with emergency childcare centers, and then moved into distance learning centers because most of our kids don't have access, either internet access or what I would call a calm learning environment at home. Many of them share a lot of spaces, which is very disruptive, right? So we pivoted through many iterations to serve our kids. That was really the impact for us. What we've experienced is what's obvious that everyone's seeing in our the educational environment, and that is significant learning loss, significant deficits. Our kids were already behind; they're even more so behind. So what's really important to us is really focusing on two things: a really strong remedial academic program and getting kids to have fun again around learning. They've been behind the screen, very static environments. Learning's become tedious, annoying. They've failed at it. So we've really been intentional on designing a program this summer and one for the fall and the next academic year around making learning fun again, very project-based, very hands-on. It was great to see some PLTW folks joining us today, because that hands-on experiential programming is so important. And what makes Boys and Girls Club really unique is we have a lot of national partners that we've engaged with: Comcast, UPS, Old Navy, Toyota, Bridgestone. We've been really effective, I believe, at having a very prescribed engagement strategy. So when we get their employees as volunteers, we have a very robust online program with My.Future that we can plug them into. And all of our CEOs, because I sit on statewide consortiums of CEOs, have very specific and I believe meaningful engagement plans to make the volunteer experience meaningful and really, really effective. And one I'll just mention that was really good through the pandemic is Tata Consultancy Services and the Go IT program. Hillary's here to speak about that, but it was great because we had a lot of volunteers from Tata, a lot of volunteers from SN Nielsen who engaged with our kids mostly virtually through a very prescribed program that was very successful. So I believe we have a lot of experience with that. And it's really what we're focusing on is we try to make learning fun. And I would even say, let's make volunteering fun again too, because we really need to be intentional about corporate partners and making that a really rich experience again. Thank you.
Dude, thank you for those wonderful comments. I like to highlight, so it's important to have a very robust engagement strategy.
Exactly.
And to kind of pivot off of that a little bit, you mentioned TCS as a wonderful partner for you through COVID-19. Hillary McDonald. Hillary, how you doing today?
I'm doing well, thank you.
So Drew has told us how wonderful TCS has been. Can you just talk a little bit about who you are, what you do, and talk to us a little bit about your STEM journey as a company? And then if you could, highlight some things that as you and other industry business partners look for in order to have I call a rich partnership.
Absolutely. So my name is Hillary McDonald. I am a Go IT lead in North America. And if you don't know TCS, first of all, you're not alone, but Tata Consultancy Services is one of the largest IT consulting companies in the world, with a very large footprint in North America. And what we do is we work with Fortune 500, 1000 companies to support their technology infrastructure. There is a very real possibility you've worked with our technology before, but haven't fully realized it because we're behind the scenes. Because of the nature of our company, we have a strong dedication to building out the STEM pipeline. And back in 2009, we had some folks in Ohio come to some of our employees in one of our big offices and say, hey, we don't have STEM education here. Can you help us teach our kids about robotics, about programming? And our company said, yes, absolutely. And since 2009, we have been building and scaling a program called Go IT, which is a standards-aligned, project-based learning digital innovation education program that introduces students to careers in technology through hands-on learning. So what we want to do is inspire students to build tech for good, leveraging the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, teaching them those 21st century skills along the way, like collaboration, public speaking, and problem solving. What we also realized as we were on our Go IT journey is that students are only half the battle, and that in order to have robust STEM education, you also have to support teachers. So through that, we partnered with Discovery Education to launch our Ignite My Future in School program, which is now in its 6th year of running and has already reached over 1 million students. And its goal is to provide transdisciplinary content that will allow teachers to take what we call computational thinking practices and embed them across all types of curriculum, from English to gym to math. Because half of the battle of learning STEM education and technology isn't just learning the hard skills like Python, it's understanding how to think algorithmically and make inferences. And Ignite My Future in School does a really good job of teaching you how to do that across all of your subject matters.
Hillary spoken like a true IT person, using the word Python, algorithm conversations. We're gonna have to get you to define those in the chat. Also, Jeremy, if you could, if we can put that Go IT information in the chat as well, because it sounds like an outstanding program. And from what Drew said, we thank you guys for participating and stepping up during the COVID-19 crisis. Very important. Also, I like to, from that, you said, so there's two ways a person might approach an industry partner. Help us with our student program, but let's not forget about if there's some things we can do to support teachers as well. So thank you for those nuggets. So during this pandemic, though, over the summer, we know that summertime is a time when a lot of students get what we call that really hands-on experience. They get to see what a company does. They get to see what an engineer or a technologist or computer scientist, just everybody in the STEM world, what the person does. With COVID-19, companies came to a screeching halt. Our buildings became empty. So now all of a sudden, how do we make sure these students get this experience? Ivana, I understand you with the wonderful organization that's really focusing on making sure students get that experience through a company called internX. So I want you to talk a little bit about that. And more importantly, though, talk to us about how your employers and universities stepped up during COVID-19 to ensure that the student had a rich experience during COVID-19.
Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. So internX is a national initiative designed to support students, particularly diverse students, with internship opportunities. And so when we launched 3 years ago, our goal was to connect students to exclusive internships. And so internships with private equity firms, internships with tech companies, internships across nonprofits. And when we launched our work, we were really excited. We were able to place hundreds of students in a matter of weeks. And then our second year, COVID-19 hit, and everything needed to go virtual. And so 100% of our internships went virtual. The internX team created a virtual guide for a lot of our employer partners. Some of them are as big as JP Morgan. And so they had an entire team working on their virtual engagement. But for some of our nonprofit partners and our mid-sized companies, we created this virtual guide to how you engage college students in a virtual environment. We also launched what we call internX virtual for companies. And so we allowed our companies to host direct events with students. And so Amazon is one of our partners. They hosted several events. Dell decided to host their events, and it allowed employer partners and hiring managers to talk directly to the students. And for our university partners, we did something similar. We initially had ambassador programs on campus. We had to move our ambassador programs to more of a virtual environment for our students. I can say that in 2021, about 80% of our internships are still virtual. For our students that were able to secure internships in person, we do provide relocation stipends, and so we worked alongside them to relocate them. As you can imagine, it was very challenging because each state is different, but we were able to get them in person. And we learned some really valuable lessons this year. Even as we go forward, we'll be using technology in the future. And so we will be doing a hybrid of in-person and virtual engagement throughout the future of internX. I can say that we've placed more than 1,000 students in internships, and so we're really proud of the work that we've been able to do thus far with our HBCU, HSI, and PWI partners.
That is amazing. In fact, I wish we knew about you. So last summer, we tried to pivot to virtual assignments for our collegiate students. In fact, and we also have high school interns, and because we didn't know what we was doing, we actually put our internship for our high school students on hold. And I mean, unfortunate for us. But I like what you said, because we had no guide. And to be quite honest, the feedback from our college students last term was, it was absolutely terrible. But this past few months, we have tried to make some changes to what we call a hybrid type internship. And I like the fact that, so I want to make sure everybody hear what you said. So you have guides both for an external engagement, internal engagement, to help companies come alongside for those internships, and also help universities to understand how do you match students and have those internships. So make sure you get that information to some of our industry partners listening, because I know they want to know, how do I get involved, how to get access to that, as well as some of our entire K-12 and higher ed educators. Thank you. Jeremy, how are we doing on time?
We're great. We're only 20 minutes in. We're in a good place.
Okay, because we do want to make sure we keep some time for our audience as well, so for questions. But just real quickly, so we know this has been a unique moment, no doubt about it. This summer, we begin to kind of start healing, I call both physically, mentally, socially. So this summer 21 is upon us, right? So what can we do, or what are we doing regarding making sure we get, I like what you said, Drew, fun activity for the students to get them caught up in their learning. What can we do to make sure we have meaningful partnerships during this summer? And this is open to all of you. Let's just have a good conversation around it. What we're doing, what we can do for this summer 21. Since I got on the headphone set, I'm gonna start with Hillary.
Yeah, I'm happy to speak to this, Reginald, because I'm really passionate about making it meaningful. You know, I really like Ivana's comments about the guide, you know, so that the role is determined, it's explained, and it can be easily followed. I think that's really important. I think it's a matter of and she spoke to this really well, of meeting our employers and our partners and community partners where they're at. You know, part of my role as CEO of the Boys and Girls Club of Dundee, I was with the National Boy Scouts. I think that's where a lot of folks from STEM Connect knew me as a strategic director there around STEM programming. And I got to study a lot of the ecosystems and worked a lot with STEM ecosystems in Austin, Texas, Indianapolis, New York City. And what I really liked was their collaborative approach, right? It was all about, okay, how does every market's different? Every employer is different, every organization, every community has different sets of resources. So what we've been very intentional on is, how do we assess what's available and where's their comfort level with it? We have some companies like Zurich is one of our big partners around workforce readiness, and they have a lot of around human resource development and job readiness, and they do training programs, but they want to do it all virtually, and they're very comfortable with that environment. Actually, they're very effective at it. The same with Hillary with Go IT. There were elements that were virtual and there were elements that were live. And with our community partners, we have some that are welcoming our kids to do tours. We're actually doing a pre-apprenticeship program this summer around engineering and robotics, and engaging several partners, both national partners and local advanced manufacturing partners. And it's really about doing the work to assess what they're comfortable with and then where we can plug them in. But I can't speak enough about what Ivana shared, that the importance of that having the role predetermined, taking the time, like everything that we've had to figure out in the pandemic, how do we make this work? It definitely takes more work. But one thing we've been fortunate about is having the resources. There's been a lot of funding resources around this, where we've been able to create a lot of this and hire additional staff and be very intentional that we know it's going to take more work to make this plug and play for whatever the comfort level is of our different partners, if that makes sense.
Drew, thank you for your comments. Ivana, Hillary.
So for us, we took two approaches. One, we launched what we call our learning management system, because we understood that college students, some of them needed to take time off because one, they couldn't afford it or the campus is closed. And so we launched our learning management system that has over 1,200 courses for free for our students so that they could fill in those gaps, because we understood that although they might not have been in school, they still needed to learn valuable tools to compete for internships and full-time offers. For our students that lost full-time offers, if we're being honest, some companies completely downsized and they canceled internships and full-time offers. We decided to work alongside our students and say, okay, you lost your full-time offer. Let's try to get you an internship at a company that's committed to hiring diverse talent full-time. And so we worked with them with an internship, and then we're able to convert some of them for full-time offers. For some of our students, they were having challenges. They didn't have broadband. They were in difficult environments. We heard from our university partners that some students could not leave campus because they could not go home back to complicated environments. And so for us as an initiative, and we're out of a private foundation, we decided to physically send students food, money, families food and money, whatever we could do to support the whole student. Because for us, our work is about passion. And we know that we can't support the student if the family is having challenges. And so we took a holistic approach to our work in 2021, which definitely in 2020, that will definitely define how we move forward in the future.
Thank you so much. I think the one thing that COVID-19 taught us that different students have different needs, and to be able to respond to those needs is impactful. Thank you. TCS, Ms. Hillary.
Yeah, so we have always put students and teachers as our primary stakeholder, and everything we do, which has been true since the inception of our program, has been with our key stakeholders in mind. So when COVID hit, and we were like cranking at capacity. We were running programs, breaking our own records, just really seeing the need for STEM and computer science education in the US and Canada. And then COVID hit, and we hit the brakes really hard. And then, like everybody else here has said, took some time to assess the needs of the people that we work with. So we spent time building out focus groups in both programs and talking to our most trusted partners and asking them what they need. And we heard two things, really. The first thing they needed was time. They needed time to figure things out. Schools suddenly panicked, and the thing that wasn't on the top of their mind was running a digital education innovation program that takes 20 hours. That wasn't their focus. And we had to say that's okay. And it was okay. They were trying to figure out how to completely shift their worlds in education. And simultaneously, they needed to figure out how to be virtual. So on top of just pausing and taking time, TCS took GoIT and Ignite My Future entirely virtual, while at the same time building out some additional initiatives in-house, like something we called EVA, which allowed teachers and schools and parents to call into a tech phone line just to figure out how to use Zoom or troubleshoot Google, which was half the battle in the beginning. Once we got past that initial hump, we were also listening to our teachers, trying to figure out how we could meaningfully engage virtually. Because one of the biggest things we heard was virtual is terrible, kids are tired, nobody can engage in Zoom. So we took all of that feedback to curate a very engaging virtual experience for GoIT, which Drew has spoken to a couple times. And how can we make sure that our students are engaged, our teachers feel supported, but also our volunteers are having a good experience too. So we built out curriculum and trainings and programming and content to make sure each one of those groups felt supported. And then Ignite My Future in School also took their entire programming virtual and made a bunch of unplugged activities because, to Ivana's point, people didn't have computers anymore. And to assume that you could do technology-based programming, it comes from a place of privilege. So we tried to figure out how we could reach students both on and off a computer. And moving forward, we're still going to keep listening. We don't have a clear answer, to be totally honest with you, but it seems like people are starting to come back online and people are looking for in-person programming again. But we're going to hold on to everything we've learned and make sure that we can continue to use these tools to adapt to the needs of our partners, which are changing every day.
Absolutely. Thank you for all that wonderful information. Panelists, I thank you for all your input, all your expertise. And, you know, at the end of the day, yeah, the COVID-19 hit, we kind of stumbled a bit, but through all in all, as a nation, as you all, your companies and your efforts, we got stronger and we got better at what we do. And hopefully we'll carry that over into the upcoming years. So with that being said, this is great conversation. But in all conversations, we have to also, how do we translate this conversation to some actual actions? At this time, I'd like to give my panelists a hand clap, because as soon as I get your responses, Jeremy, I'm gonna encourage the audience to send in questions. And Jeremy, I'll let you read the questions and you'll take it from there. But absolutely outstanding job to all of you. But in your last remarks here, and we'll keep this one kind of short, how do we take this conversation and come up with some actions that we can move forward? I know some of you have already talked about this, so if there's something else you want to use as your closing remarks, we'll do that now. And then Jeremy, as soon as they finish, we'll open up for Q&A.
Sounds good. So while folks are getting those closing remarks in, if you're in the audience, make sure you get those questions in. And again, even if you don't have any questions, click that little Q&A button. Right now it has a little red 5 next to it. Take a look at the questions that are there so far and hit the little thumbs up if there are questions that resonate with you. And get your questions in. We'll get to as many of them as possible.
Oh yeah, great shirt, Jeremy.
Reginald, who did you want to? Yeah,
go ahead, Jeremy.
I was just going to ask, who do you want to close first?
I was getting ready. So Drew is unmuted, which is like raising your hand, Drew. So just a summary, closing remark, or how we put this conversation to action.
Yeah, thanks, Reggie. So it's really, I think let's just jump in and figure it out. You know, this is a different summer, just like this year has been different. Yeah. And the important part is to engage and work with your community partner, whoever that is, whether it's a school, an out of school partner, and have those conversations about here's what we've done in the past. How do we adapt this? How do we make it work for you in the summer? What could we do, or what are your needs for? And I think we're all in those conversations now, but I feel that's the most important one. And then I would say, just looking to the fall, let's come up with a plan on, okay, how do we really look at the supports for the school year in what I'll call the recovery year.
Absolutely. Sorry, Ms. Jackson, you up next.
Yes. So for internX, we're definitely having those honest conversations. If there's individuals on the line on the corporate side or the university engagement side, we're more than welcome to have a separate conversation about how we partner. But we're having conversations with our partners about what can be done. I can tell you that in this year, we've had a hybrid of positions come in for the fall. And so students are now having more internship opportunities than they may have had in the summer. And so this virtual environment has allowed companies to think outside of the box as far as timeline. We've had even some students come on as consultants for companies. One student, someone went down for maternity leave and they hired the intern as their consultant until the person came back. And so the fact that we are virtual, some students are in certain areas of the country where a company may not be. And so the fact that you're having virtual internships means that location is no longer a barrier. And that's a great opportunity for a lot of young people. We are preparing for a hybrid fall. And so some places we will be in person and some places we will remain virtual. But we're saying that we're going to do whatever we can to support the student at every level. And we're going to do this work as passionately as we've done it in the past. And we're looking forward to anyone that wants to engage.
Thank you. And for clarification, right now, you're only doing collegiate internships, right?
Yes.
Okay. Okay.
We
Thank you so much. High school is coming.
Sophomore year.
Okay.
High school's coming, yes.
Thank you. Ms. Hillary, TCS.
Yes. So I just want to close on saying that we are so excited to really start ramping up again and partnering with anybody who is interested. If you are out there, if you're somebody who works in school districts, Department of Education, we partner directly with school districts at the state, local level. We have a couple of successful state partnerships. So if you're interested in thinking about how we can build GoIT into your computer science STEM curriculum, we are very open to those conversations. If you're government officials, again, we're working at the state level to help you identify or help us identify and work together to find where the most need-based areas are, who might need entirely free resources for your students. And if you're a nonprofit who's looking to engage in new content, who needs a way to engage your students as they're starting to come back to in-person programming, or if you're still looking to engage folks virtually, let us know. We have all sorts of ways to engage, and we are looking forward to engaging in. Again, the programming is entirely free. I dropped my email in the chat. I can do it again. Just let us know. If you're a corporation and you think, if this sounds great and I want to do something similar, my biggest piece of advice is to plan backwards. Understand your stakeholders, which should be your teachers and students and volunteers. What are their goals? What are the industry needs? And how do you plan backwards from those pieces to come up with a very successful program that meets the needs of all parties? Because it will only be successful if teachers want to use it because it's standards aligned, if students want to do it because it's fun, and if volunteers want to be engaged because it's industry relevant.
Oh, Ms. McDonald, you got it down pat. I hope my Indiana colleagues is listening so we can make sure we get TCS in the great state of Indiana. So Jeremy, and again, once again, big hand clap to all our panelists. Thank you. Jeremy, I'm gonna turn it over to you. If a certain question is going to a panelist, you call on them or you just ask them for whoever wants to come in.
Sounds
it's all
good.
yours, sir. Thank you.
Sounds good. So before we get to all the questions, there's one that did come up a lot, and I think it's a really quick hit one. Michelle Sedberry and others are asking how you get to the access. How do you access the guides from internX? I'm putting that link back in the chat, Ivana. Are they just there in kind of an obvious location, or does somebody need to reach out to you? What's the best route for getting access?
Yeah, so the best route is to definitely reach out to me. internX is free for everyone, and so I can get you access to those guides.
Perfect. So Ivana's email was in the chat earlier. I'm sure she'll put it back in, and it'll also be in the follow-up materials. I'd like to go to Darren Gray if he's still there. Darren has some a question about hands-on learning for students in these times. Darren, are you there with us?
Yeah, I'm here.
You go ahead and ask your question.
Yeah, here you go. I'm muted here. Yeah, the problem that we were having is a number of our students just don't have access to the same types of materials they have at their schools. So, you know, if you're trying to teach kids programming with either Microbit or Arduino, they may not have the equipment, they may not have the computers, they may not even have good broadband access. So how are folks doing hands-on learning for kids who are still at home?
Yeah, go ahead, Drew.
Thank you, Jeremy. We actually delivered kits. We were very intentional. I could say every one of our 1,000 kids, we had 1,000 that we engaged virtually initially in our summer camp program last year, and they all got Lego kits. They all got and weekly supplies. So we gave them weekly. We were fortunate in the resources we had, the distribution network, because we engaged community partners to do the delivery of it. So we were very intentional that we would do it at home with physical kits. However, we were just selected to be the virtual program provider, one of 5 clubs across the United States that is a virtual program provider for children of our military. So every one of the branches of the military. That one's been much more challenging, but what we've really dialed in on is providing programs and projects that, and actually this is something that Cognizant helped us with quite a bit when we worked closely with them around their maker strategy, was what do you have at home that you can then engage? So when we designed the curriculum, we were very intentional on focusing on what do you have at home physically that you can have and create some very meaningful, fun, and engaging projects with.
Hillary, how about you? Have you had any experience with your work in doing things with students that are home and don't necessarily have all of the devices they need?
Oh, we have tried, and we have tried with Darren. interestingly enough, hey Darren, we actually worked with Darren out in USC, and it was a little bumpy. We worked with them to buy microbits, but then we had some supply chain issues with microbit. We were trying to figure out how we can still have an engaging program, and luckily enough, most of their students did have access to technology. So we were still able to teach them some basic concept using everything else that is relevant for Go IT, which extends far beyond just how do we code a microbit. They still got to ideate an idea and present and build presentations. Some of their students took the time to learn Tinkercad. But that is certainly a challenge, trying to get physical materials to students when they're not in a school, they're dispersed, you're not in a central location. And some of our other programs, we just completely eliminated materials entirely, just because everybody kind of came up against the issue of, we don't know how to reach our students, we don't know how to mail things to them. And being a company running at any given point 20 different programs, for us, we relied more on the partner to try to help us with those logistics.
And it's tough, right? And I know that some school districts have done things like still having the buses run and drop things off in different neighborhoods. I've had a lot of success, and I know that a lot of the folks in the ecosystems have had a lot of success with things like Robotify, which is a robotics and programming platform that doesn't use physical devices. It's all virtual. And I think Veronica just actually posted a Mars challenge that the ecosystems worked on in there. So I would encourage people to think about all sorts of solutions. Look at those delivery mechanisms, because it is always best if we can get kids touching things and building with their hands. But when we can't, there are more and more opportunities out there to address this. I'd like to go to Rafika, who has some questions about social emotional learning and students with disabilities. Rafika, are you there with us?
I am here.
Hi,
Hello.
Rafika. Could you go ahead and ask your question?
Oh, the question I had to do with, let me go back and see what I wrote. The opportunities that are being provided for the students, if they're comprehensive in that they include social and emotional needs of the learners.
Yeah, so how are all of you thinking about students with emotional needs, students with disabilities, non-typical students? How are we thinking about those students and getting them involved with these types of opportunities? Ivana?
Yeah, so several things. In the midst of the pandemic, we saw a lot of students struggling with depression. And so we partnered with UNCF, United Negro College Fund is one of our partners in this work. So we did several things. We launched a series on mental health and wellness. It was a webinar that students can opt into and talk about their challenges. It was closed door for students, and so adults couldn't attend. And so they could have honest conversations with this expert and get support as they needed. And then we were able to connect them with, if they were on campus, some students were on campus, we were able to connect them with on-campus support. If they were off campus, we were able to find someone in their area. We also launched Wellness Fridays. And so we hired someone to be their yoga coach or someone, and to literally get their bodies moving at a time where we felt like they just needed to decompress when you're in. I couldn't imagine being a college student at this time and with all the things happening. And then for our students with disabilities, we serve those students in a more hands-on environment. And so we have a team that works with that student. If we need to relocate them, if we need to work with the employer partner, they have a team of people dedicated to make sure that they're supported in the appropriate way.
Drew, I saw you had something that Boys and Girls Clubs are doing as well.
Yes, Jeremy. So around social emotional supports, all of our leaders, our site directors and our site support staff are trained in trauma-informed care and restorative practices. And we have a social worker on staff. We have agencies that we partner with too, just like Ivana does, for referrals for more intensive programming. But we were very, the wellness piece that she touched on really is important to us, and particularly for our staff, I have to say, because they went through a lot of pivots and a lot of challenges and a lot of issues with their own families and their own children at home through this. So we were really intentional on not only paying attention to the needs of our members and our children, but really intentional with our staff I'd also like to just add on Rafika's question about disabilities. I'm super passionate about this. I was CEO of a Turning Point Autism Foundation, and these are really profoundly impacted kids. And we created a partnership with Office Max and Walgreens, where we created mock environments, a mock store and a mock distribution center, and we trained them on adaptive use and career, basically career pathways with adaptive supports. And we're doing the same thing at our high school center with our high school program. Actually, during the day, we're taking the high school children into we have a build lab maker space, a tech center, a culinary lab, and we're working with the special education program on the adaptive supports for those kids that need it, combining our career pathways with their adaptive supports. I think it's really important. It's just really getting, to our point, we're not the experts in adaptive support for those with disabilities, but I think Ivana spoke to that well. How do you engage those partners that are, and then make it effective?
I think that makes a lot of sense. And this is an area that we're only just beginning to explore, not only in virtual terms, but also what the long-term impacts of this past year have been and will have on our young people and our old people. So it's something that I think we need to continue to talk about within the ecosystems. This is not a problem that's going away. It's a problem that's growing. So thank you for that question, Rafika. I'd like to go to Martina right now, who has a question that is interesting to me as somebody who is in schools for 16 years. We talked a lot about things like grit and self-determination, but it's a difficult nut to crack as we're thinking about how to actually teach it. Martina, can you ask your question? I'm going to assume that either Martina's having trouble or stepped away. So Martina's question was, how do we help students remain accountable and overcome challenges? With the work that you're doing with students, are there components that you believe are helping them have that self-determination, have that grit and that ability to face a challenge, maybe fail at it, and then keep moving forward? Hillary?
Yeah, I'll jump in here. So growth mindset and grit is the core of Go IT's programming. We're all about growth mindset and empathy in the design thinking model. And we start with teaching students that it's okay to maybe not get an answer right the first time, because that only means you're going to get better in the future. And we work really hard to build that messaging throughout the duration of our program. And one of the things that holds them accountable isn't us saying you have a grade, things are due at a certain time, but it's building passion in the actual work they're doing. So one of the things we say, and this is applicable even when you're talking about social emotional learning or disabilities, is that our content, Go IT or Ignite My Future, is not prescriptive, but very suggestive. And we work with our partners to make sure that we are maybe shifting our content to meet the needs of our students. And with that, that means students are building out projects that they are passionate about. So at some point, the accountability shifts from a teacher trying to tell a student to do something to students really taking ownership over a project themselves. And that's when you, I think, have a very successful program, is when you can inspire passion in students. So what we ask them to do is to think about problems in their own communities surrounding maybe a theme around one of the SDGs, and then they get to take on their own projects and build it out. So we also bring in a small competitive element, which at least, creates some sort of a timeline, but for the most part, if you can create a program that's engaging enough, you don't really have to hold students' feet to the fire to get a project done. They're going to be inspired themselves to work on it.
Drew, I know
Real
that
quick,
Boys
I'd
and
like to
Girls
jump
Clubs.
in from my,
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, Reginald.
from my school board perspective. One thing I heard from a lot of teachers and some parents was just how resilient their students were becoming because of COVID-19. Sometimes, a situation like this, it forces you to, sometimes a struggle brings about grit. It helps you to understand how do I take it upon myself to overcome these challenges? So one of the good things for me out of COVID-19 was some of the students who just kind of was like, it forced them to become more intentional about, I can do this. So, and I know several probably have those same examples throughout the nation, but just wanted to put that in. Our students from our elementary up to our high schools, they stepped up and really helped some of our adults get through it.
I think that's an important point to make, Reginald. It's really important that we have this conversation now about what teachers need to know to do better, what students need to know to do better, and about learning. Those are important conversations, but we shouldn't have them at the expense of remembering the teachers and students stepped up at an incredible level across this country and really put forth a whole lot more work, frankly, than they typically perhaps do. It's been my wife's a teacher, and I watched her work, double, triple hours during this past year to try to make sure that everything is up and running. Drew, I know that Boys and Girls Club, that kind of determination and self-efficacy is always been a part of Boys and Girls Club. But what about in the STEM lens? Are there things that Boys and Girls Clubs are doing around STEM to increase that ability?
Absolutely. And I'll piggyback on Hillary's comment and her share about, making it theirs, making them own it, particularly at the higher levels when you talk about high school students, middle school and high school students. It's so important to have their ownership and passion in it. And Go IT does that really well. But we were really fortunate in our work with STEM Connector to engage with Dr. Robert Tye at the University of Virginia. And he identified 3 learning preferences: curiosity, creating, making, and competition is like the 3 drivers for kids that if your program hits on all 3, it's a home run, right? And so we do pre and post participation surveys that his graduate students do for us to identify those 3 preferences to see if we're hitting on all of them and to what level we are, and are they really effective and engaging, right? And the biggest one that we found, and this is a really good one with our experience with Go IT, is reward. There's responsibility and reward, and grit is built if you feel that there's, I believe, and I've seen that it's built if there's something at the end that's of benefit. You somehow this is going to improve you or change you or impact you or empower you, right? So the reward piece at the end is really big. So and I'll give you one example. In the area of academics, is we're using a iReady platform on remedial academic assessment, and then it's a self-guided tool that we're working with our school districts on. And based on the number of modules and their percentages, we have at the end of the week, we have the bronze, silver, and gold awards and prizes, and they're different treasure chests. And it's like, you know what, and this is at the elementary level, obviously. High school students not gonna be motivated by a treasure chest, but it works really well for them. But at the high school level, it's a t-shirt and a water bottle or a field trip, a canoe trip. It's some access to reward. I think that's really important. And with Go IT, it was gift cards, Amazon gift cards and or Best Buy gift cards, things that they care about, right? So you have to have that nugget for them that you put the work in, there's going to be a reward. And once they start to experience that cycle, we start at a very young age, but I think it's really important to pay attention to.
I love that. So we've got 2 other questions that I'd like to get in before we close. The first is Elizabeth Rafferty. Are you there with us? Can you ask your question about funds and funding?
Yes, hi. I just found out that the American Rescue Plan has billions or millions of dollars for school till 2026. And I believe they've been asked to work with CBOs for learning recovery and all the things that you've been talking about. What advice do you have for school districts and how they should spend those funds?
Yeah, so I think school districts, I think this is going to be all over the map, right? Some districts are going to have a little bit extra, some are going to have a lot extra. So the 3 of you, how would you prioritize funds that districts have, whether it's from something like the economic recovery funds or just funds that they're able to kind of squirrel away internally? What should the priorities be? What should districts be thinking about from an expenditure standpoint as we're trying to address these needs? Reginald, I just saw you on mute. Did you have something to say?
Real quickly, I like what you said. It's really across, it depends across, and it's across all different districts. First and foremost, it should be intentional about making sure students, one, have fun. I like that, have fun, but they also get back in the mode of learning, and continue to achieve at the next level. Whatever the plan, however you spend the money, make sure you keep it focused in that area. Also, good communication, bring parents alongside of the students to understand how the education system, how their school system might have changed, bring them alongside of it as well. And then of course, always encourage and support your teachers to the best of your ability, whether it be financial, however it looks, or different resources.
Yeah, they have so much on their plate, Reginald. I so agree with that from the teacher's perspective. That's what we found, because we do in Illinois, we have a lot of access to additional funding, and ISBE's trying to figure out how to best do it. And our Alliance of CEOs, we have 21 clubs that are putting in joint proposals around this. And of course, I'm a big fan of out of school time, and particularly for under-resourced kids that have challenging situations at home. The parents aren't always engaged. They aren't able to be engaged. They're working hard, or it's a single parent that doesn't have the time. So I really believe the strength of our program is as that out of school time advocate. We have them for 3 hours a day. Invest in us in that. And I shared a little bit about the iReady platform. What I love about where the education system has evolved to now is the ability to have not just the PARCC test and that, the annual assessment test, but most of like our district partners, all of our school district partners are using a remedial assessment and solution tool that our staff can learn and support in the way a parent would with helping their child do homework. I think that's really important. And so when I look at investment, Elizabeth, to your question about where can we really spend the funds, when you've got 3 hours a day of out of school time that you can really pour into the kids who need it the most, I'm a big advocate for, let's look at those digital tools that we can jointly use to move the needle forward the same way a parent, if they could, support their child. That's my perspective on it. And that's at every level. We're looking at it at every primary, secondary. How do we support that?
I think that makes a lot of sense. And I also think, just as a former district administrator, long time, to think about two things in particular. One, think about the access and devices that you'll be able to buy when you have this one-time influx of money, that you're not going to have expenses that you can't afford down the line. And number two is, don't forget, please don't forget that your educators need support, perhaps through professional development, perhaps just through, paid summertime to work, but they're going to need support in order to really, really integrate these lessons. I always look to things, again, we talked about Robotify earlier, and there are other products like that can be bought and people can have access to. They don't have a giant expense. So I would think about all of those. All right, I'd like to close with a question here. And one of these days, I'm going to convince Alyssa and Veronica and Jan to buy me a giant gong, because I really want one, because we're on a time limit for this, because we're almost out of time. So in a minute or so, I'd like each of you, including you, Reginald, to answer this question. So Laura is asking, we've got all sorts of things that we're thinking about right now: universal broadband access, teacher industry coordination, more K-12 transdisciplinary project-based learning, ongoing team-based mentorships, effective system thinking policy that leverages stakeholder expertise, all these different things we're thinking about. Right now, we're still in the hopefully waning days of kind of a crisis mode over COVID. How do we transition? What's the first step from each of you? How do we transition from crisis mode to taking the things that we've learned and experienced and codifying them into improving education permanently? What should we all be thinking about as we move from COVID to our new normal after COVID? I'm going to quickly go around the horn. Reginald?
Thank you, Jeremy. Real quickly, that's a tough question just to think about in 30 seconds, real quickly. So it's going to take time. It takes time to heal. And as we move out of crisis, let's keep in mind the human being, the spiritual, physical, emotional side of all people in our communities. As we heal as people, we will begin to heal in our educational settings, our industry settings, and in our community. But let's focus on our own internal healing and helping others to heal, and think about ourselves as I call human mankind and what makes us wonderful as people living together.
Thank you, Reginald. Ivana?
I'm going to say, let's lead with grace. And we at the internX initiative have been pushing this since COVID hit. Lead with grace and be collaborative. You can't do everything in a silo. And if I'm being honest, I learned some of the best things from our industry partners. And so we're working with corporations, we're working with universities, we're working with students. We have a student ambassador program where our students talk back to us and tell us what they need us to give them. And so just be mindful that this has been a difficult time for everyone. And so leading with grace and being collaborative is the best step forward.
Leading with grace, I love it. Drew?
Yeah, Jeremy, don't ever let a crisis be wasted, right? I'm a big believer in that. And just as we've realized the insanity of driving an hour and a half to work to go sit in one box when you can just as easily do it at home and save 3 hours or 2 hours of productivity a day. The one I'd like to see left behind is the focus on the memorization and knowledge rather than the experiential and the innovative mindset and the growth. When you look at disruption in the workforce, this disruption in all of our institutions is the perfect time, I believe, to focus on what's happening in our real 21st century workforce. What are those real needs? Where is education at on it? And what can we really pivot on here to really make it more meaningful and effective? And I think I'm just a huge believer in hands-on projects, project-based learning, and that pivot's really critical and really necessary, and that this is the time to do it, to really evolve away from knowledge-based and into more project-based experiences.
It's not about memorizing, it's about how we can apply knowledge. And Hillary, can you bring us home?
Absolutely. And these folks have said it best, but I think if 2020 and early 2021 has done anything, it's really slapped us in the face with inequities in school and how the old way of school wasn't working, especially for our most need-based students. So to Drew's point, I think we need to be collaborative, and I think we need to shift and take all of the lessons we've learned both in a virtual environment and a hybrid environment and figure out how we can use these lessons to be flexible to meet students' needs. Because if there's anything we all know is that when you give students the right resources and the right way to learn, that every single student is equally as capable of success.
Thank you, Hillary. Thank you all for joining us today. Please join us for our next joint webinar with STEM Connector, June 23rd at 1 p.m. to discuss the important topic of the role the community colleges are playing with accelerating student STEM learning and catalyzing community resources. That webinar link will be in the chat in a moment, and it'll also be in the follow-up emails. Even before that June 23rd webinar, there's another conversation that tracks with today's webinar. Please join us at 1 p.m. Eastern on May 25th for strategies for how to build and sustain relationships with business. That webinar registration link will also be in the chat and in follow-up emails. I'd like to thank Ted Wells from STEM Connector, Ivana Jackson, Hillary McDonald, Drew Glassford, and Reginald. Thank you for all of your work today and for the knowledge that you dropped on all of us. We really appreciate you taking the time to help educate us all on these incredible opportunities for our youth. And thank you all for attending, and we will see you next time.